You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 436. To be a filmmaker, you have to lead. You have to be psychotic in your desire to do something. People always like the easy route. You have to push very hard to get something unusual, something different. Danny Boyle.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Rise of the Filmtrepreneur, how to turn your independent film into a profitable business. It's harder today than ever before for independent filmmakers to make money with their films. From predatory film distributors ripping them off to huckster film aggregators who prey upon them, the odds are stacked against the indie filmmaker. The old distribution model of making money with your film is broken, and there needs to be a change. The future of independent filmmaking is the entrepreneurial filmmaker or the filmtrepreneur. In Rise of the Filmtrepreneur, I break down how to actually make money with your film projects and show you how to turn your indie film into a profitable business. With case studies examining successes and failures, this book shows you the step-by-step method to turn your passion into a profitable career. If you're making a feature film, series, or any other kind of video content, the Filmtrepreneur method will set you up for success. The book is available in paperback, ebook, and of course, audiobook. If you want to order it, just head over to www.filmbizbook.com. That's filmbizbook.com. And today's show is also sponsored by the Heart Chart Screenwriting Masterclass taught by legendary screenwriter James V. Hart, the writer of Bram Stoker's Dracula, Hook, and Contact, to name a few. His unique story mapping system will teach you how to get your script ready for production and the marketplace. To gain instant access, head over to bulletproofscreenwriting.tv/Heart Chart. That's HART chart. Well, guys, today on the show, we have returning champion Linda Nelson, who is a distribution specialist. She runs Indie Rights with her partner, Michael Madison, and is doing a lot of good things for filmmakers. I want to bring Linda back on the show because every time she comes on, there's new stuff to talk about. Since last we spoke, we have been going through obviously an insane time in the world and in the world of distribution, and so many things have changed. And she definitely has her hand on the pulse of what's going on in distribution for independent films. So we talk about what's going on in Kovid, how she's handling it, how business is booming in some areas and dying in others. And we also do a little bit of myth busting in regards to expectations that filmmakers have for their films. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Linda Nelson. I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion Linda Nelson. How are you doing, Linda?
Hey, Alex. I'm doing great and honored to be back again.
Of course. I think, we last time we spoke was about a year ago this time, around the time of AFM. And I think it's going to be a yearly thing. We should just do it every year, if not monthly. We should just do a show monthly because things are changing so fast.
It's so true. And I know that for a fact because I've had several people recently tell me that, oh, I heard about you because I listened to Alex Ferrari's podcast. And so we were going to do this and that relative to the deliverables. And I said, well, you know what? Things have changed since then. So we have a new deliverables document and what is happening in the industry is changing because they would start to talk about things. Well, we got to do TVOD first. We'll do this TVOD window. And then, I don't know about, Avod.
We're going to get into TVOD and Avod in a minute, but I wanted to ask you about deliverables. And this is something that people listening have to understand. I've been in post-production for 20 odd years. So I'm very well aware about deliverables. I've delivered over 50 features. I get it. I remember a time where deliverables were pretty stable. It was pretty much the same kind of physical deliverables and things, but things are changing almost so rapidly. Like, first of all, 1080p is still the standard, right? You please put away the whole myth that 4K is an absolute necessity.
That is absolutely true. I would say the only thing that we don't take anymore is SD, or standard definition.
Correct.
Okay. It just doesn't look good on an 80-inch television. So
not so much.
No. And we feel bad about that because our first indie film is on SD and it looks awful.
I know. I put mine in the other day and I was like, oh, ouch. Let me just at least blow it up to 720.
Right. Now, where it stands today, and this could change in 6 months, is that everyone except for Netflix will take HD.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there are variations on HD. What we insist on getting is a 1920 by 1080 ProRes 422 HQ 2-channel stereo. That is our minimum and required format because everyone except for Netflix will take that. Netflix now does require 4K.
Really?
Yes. So you're not going on Netflix without 4K and professional sound.
Does it need to be 5.1 surround sound or can it be stereo?
Yes. No, it needs to be 5.1. And this is another thing. The 5.1 that is required by most platforms is not a 6-channel 5.1. It's actually an 8-channel 5.1. And that's because in addition to the regular 5.1, it has two stereo tracks attached. That's 7 and 8 is left and right stereo. And the reason they want that file is because their software can detect what a user is going to play back, the movie on. So if you have a television and you have surround sound settings set, Amazon, for example, or iTunes can detect, they can have 5.1. But if they see that you don't have 5.1, then they're just going to deliver stereo to you. So that's why they want that 8-track, 8-channel stereo.
Very
5.1.
For right now, and in about 6 or 8 months, it could be 8K. I mean, we don't know. Like, things are changing so rapidly. I hope not too. Trust me. I did one of the most popular podcasts I ever had was Don't Shoot in 4K. And people lost their minds. This is back in 2015. People lost their minds and there was a rationale. It's still, I mean, the world has just changed so much.
I think people should shoot in K, but they don't necessarily at the time have to finish in 2K.
Yeah, or not 2K, 2K, 4K. Right, 4K. But now we're talking about cameras that have 12K that are affordable. We're talking about 8,000.
And that's great. And we're about to buy a new RED camera, and I think we're going to get 8K.
Sure.
And what's great about being able to shoot that is that in post you can recompose the frame, and that's an incredible option. So it can oftentimes save you from having to do a 2-camera shoot. Actually.
Oh, absolutely. I've gotten a lot of coverage shooting 4K, just even 4K and zooming in. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But as Werner Herzog says, when you reframe in post, it is the tools of the coward. Well, Werner, I'm sorry. We're all cowards. Yes. Now, the elephant in the room that we haven't spoken about yet is COVID. It has completely thrown the entire planet upside down, let alone our little corner of the business and industry. How do you see COVID changing the distribution side of the business? What are the platforms looking for? Is there a lack of content? How is it changing?
Well, so far, I don't think there's a lack of content simply because there were all of these movies going into post as COVID started. So all of those films have been being edited and are now coming out of post and coming to distributors to be put up on platforms. But I think we will start to see a diminished number of films because there hasn't been any new production. So I think by, say, January or February, we're going to start to see fewer films being submitted. For us, because everyone, even editors, are stuck at home, so they're editing faster, filmmakers that maybe had day jobs, and so they had to edit, at night, now are finding that they have more time on their hands and they're editing, quicker than they normally would have. So we're seeing a lot of content and a lot of submissions. Our submissions have probably tripled during COVID. So unfortunately, the downside of that is that we've had to become more selective in the films that we take because we can only handle a certain number of films. It's very time consuming for us to do the encoding and delivery and QC. So there's only 4 of us. We have 4 people in our company. And so there is a limit to how many we can handle. The good thing is that is improving the quality of our catalog. But at the same time, I kind of miss that feeling of being a champion for brand new filmmakers. We always loved that idea that we could work with filmmakers that were having a hard time getting distribution from like bigger companies.
But the platforms themselves aren't accepting new filmmakers and maybe lower quality films that might been in the past given a chance to find an audience. Now those days are gone. Is that correct?
Oh, I think it's very true. And that's, again, another sad thing for truly new filmmakers, because they've had so much content coming at them that they've decided that they have to be more selective. Amazon in particular, because they opened the doors to anyone. Anybody that could get their film uploaded went up on Amazon. And they started to get heavily criticized by the public in general, that there was a lot of, subpar films.
There is.
And because they want to be considered as good a platform as Netflix or, Google Play, they very seriously decided they were going to be more discerning. And they didn't really do that at first by not accepting films. What they did was they were still taking films, but then had to actually compete with all the other films that were on the platform. So that's how they came up with this concept of customer engagement rating. So all of a sudden, you're in a competition with studio films, if you want to know the truth. So your film had to prove that it was engaging with an audience somewhere above 50% of all of the other films that were up there, or you were going to make a penny an hour. And because of that, so many films that could be making a decent amount of money at 10 cents an hour. If they were making $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month, that's enough for some filmmakers to live on. But when that turns into $200 a month, you're not paying your rent with it.
Or $25 a month.
Or 25. Right? But I mean, particularly that class of indie filmmakers that were able to get a couple $1,000s a month, it allowed them to make movies full time. But you just, when that's cut down to $200 or a couple $100, you're out of the competition, so to speak. So that's the primary way they've been able to, knock off, or discourage, subpar, what they consider subpar or non-competing content. And so I think that was the first way. Secondly, they started to look at, actually purging certain films. And if they found, even if you had a CER, but they felt that your film wasn't competing or it wasn't a good enough quality or they were getting any kind of, complaints from customers that they would purge it, and without notice, they purge files. So certain files, would just disappear, and they don't send you a notice. They're gone. It just says not available.
Right, because basically it's their sandbox and it's their rules. Sure. And they do whatever the hell they want, and they can care less about the film. They truly can care less about the filmmaker. And this is something that has happened with every platform that opens up. At first, the doors are wide open. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, everybody can come in. Everyone can make money. Everyone could do everything. And then once they have market share or audience, they start tightening and tightening and tightening and tightening till all those people that used to be able to get in are no longer invited to the party. Right. And that's what's happening with Amazon and also with Netflix, with Tubi, with all of these other companies where they used to be wide open. Is that fair?
Sure. Absolutely. Before, we used to put several films up on Netflix and Hulu. And in fact, our own indie film, the third film that we did, Delivered, made probably on Hulu the best money that it made while it was, when it first came out, the first couple of years it was out. But, and Netflix was the first to do this. They have decided that they want primarily original content. So if they acquire something, they want exclusivity. And so now Hulu has also adopted that. So for the most part, unless they really, 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 really want your film, it's going to be exclusive. And because they pay a flat fee, there's no upside potential. So we don't recommend any indie films do it, because if you're exclusive with them, you might as well just sell it to them. And in fact, we've actually even said to some people, oh, I really have to be on Netflix. I say, okay, you know what? Go to one of the companies like Bitmax or Quiver that will pitch your film, pay them to pitch your film to Netflix and see if you get on. Because we're not interested in distributing a film if we can only put it on Netflix.
Right. And if basically you take on a film and they give you $50,000 for that film, and that's all you can make off that film for the next 2 years, or depending on the term of the length of the agreement, that's not really interesting to you. There's no upside. You can't go anywhere else. You can't make a deal with a foreign distributor to, a buyer to buy.
Else with it.
Yeah, you're done. And I've heard
they don't need us, and I want to be honest with them about that.
Right, so. Exactly. And from what I'm also hearing from the grapevine, I've heard from multiple producers and multiple producers, distributors, and filmmakers who have been dealing with Netflix is now, and I'm not sure if you've had this experience yet, because I'm not sure how much you're dealing with them currently, but now, before, like Hulu, when I sold my film to Hulu, and licensed it to them, it was a 12-month deal, and it was X amount of money, and they would just break that up in quarterly payments during the course of the term. That's right. Now, Netflix is starting the payments at the end of the term. So if you sign a 2-year deal, those first 2 years, you don't get a dime. Oh, that's what I've heard that from, I've actually had filmmakers on, or not on, but I've spoken and consulted with filmmakers who've had high 6-figure offers from Netflix, but they're like, yeah, it's a 2-year deal exclusive. And they're like, oh yeah, but we can't pay you for 2 years. And then at the end of the 2 years, and then we'll start your payments. And we're like, they just walked away from the deal. Like, why would you go with a deal like that? Yeah, sure. It's Netflix. It's like, Warner Brothers or Disney, but if there's no money in it, yeah, come on.
Right. I know at some point, you just have to go. It's, why is it still considered the Holy Grail? And it just really doesn't need to be anymore. So I think that, slowly the word is getting out there that you don't have to be on Netflix to be successful, and that sometimes even if you go with Netflix, that, you're hurting your film rather than helping it, that you really could make a lot more. Because we have plenty of films that might have gotten like a $30,000 deal with Netflix, but they've made $300,000 in the first 2 years. Right. So, we see our job as being, to maximize the revenue that you can see from your film so you can keep making more movies. I
Right.
mean, that's the point, you know. I think there are sometimes exceptions where someone doesn't want to make movies. They just want to be a director for the studios. And so they're more concerned with their reputation.
Right.
And so there are occasionally, you know, if that's what they want, you know, then, but that's not usually the films that we get. The films that we get are usually from filmmakers that want to make movies
and make
right?
money. But the end goal, that's why I always ask filmmakers when they ask me to consult them on them, like, what's your end goal? Is your end goal to get this up on Netflix so your own personal cachet as a director goes up and you can leverage that into getting another gig? Or do you want to make money? And that's two very different outcomes. And filmmakers have to be honest with themselves about what they, and I know everybody's like, well, I want both. I'm like, well, yeah, sure. Yeah, we all want both. Now, do you, like, you and I have been in the business for quite some time. And I mean, I wasn't making movies in the 80s, but I'm a student of the industry and I worked in a video store. So I saw a little bit of what happened back in the 80s, which was that in the 80s, you could literally finish almost any movie. If you actually finished it, produced it, and delivered it, it was sold.
Right.
Period. That was the barrier of entry. Now, the barrier of entry to make a movie was extremely high. It would, you know, low end, we're talking $300,000 to $500,000, and that's super low end. We're talking Roger Corman style films at that point, but you could make money. As the years have gone on and the access to the gear and the distribution, everything has gone up, more and more people have flooded in the industry. So now, and I'd love to hear what you think, do you think that you have to be so much more than a filmmaker and so much better at your skill set to even survive as a filmmaker? Meaning you need to understand marketing. You need to understand distribution. You need to understand deliverables. You need to understand all these other tools that you used to be able to just hire somebody to do a lot of times. But you need to have a lot of these tools in your toolbox just to make a living, just to sustain you, not get rich, not blow up, not like just to make a living. Because before you literally, it was like shooting fish in a barrel back in the 80s and the 90s. Just making a movie got you. And now everyone makes a movie. Like, so. So what do you think?
That's why your book is a very, very valuable, because it talks about the need for filmmakers to really be entrepreneurs. And to really understand everything they can do to promote and expand their business with their movie. Your movie now, I think, can be like the core element of a brand, you know, or a business that you build around your film. But you have got to have the business skills now. It's really, really important. And I'll go back a little bit to that conversation we were having about curation, because now, and even I'll go back a little bit further to the Amazon situation. Another thing that has happened with Amazon is that Amazon owns IMDb TV. And IMDb TV is their Avod channel, and it's their move to Avod. And that move is very important for them, because in the past, they had to pay for all of their content out of their subscription pool. So in other words, everybody would be subscribing to Amazon Prime. But that money is not used just for movies. That was like a freebie that you got because you were getting free shipping. Well, because the Kovid, everybody's home. Nobody's going out shopping. Everybody's shopping online. They need that money to cover all those shipping costs, distribution centers. So they don't want to use that pool of Prime subscription money to pay for content. So what do? Okay, they just say, okay, we're going to encourage everybody to move over to IMDb TV. Then the advertisers are going to pay for the content, and we don't have to take that out of our pocket. So we're, and we'll talk a little bit more about this whole move to Avod and what that's all about, because, but that's why Amazon is doing it, because Amazon is different than other, subscription channels. That's the only business they're in is movies.
Generally speaking,
right.
Netflix. I've been saying this for a long time. Netflix is extremely vulnerable because they have basically one stream of income. I mean, sure, they sell an occasional Stranger Things t-shirt or a Cobra Kai t-shirt at this point. But that is not Disney. Disney is a very diversified company. Like right now, Disney's entire theme park and resort, which is about 25% of their yearly revenue, we're talking about billions of dollars, is shut down. But their other other revenue streams are doing really, really well, especially Disney Plus. And we'll talk about Pvod later on too, because I'm dying to talk to you about Pvod as well.
So to continue that, so that's what's happening with Amazon and part of why they, made the pay rate so low, because that's another, encouragement for people to switch to IMDb TV. Now, the problem is that an individual filmmaker cannot get on IMDb TV. So that means that all of a sudden we become a gatekeeper for Amazon in that sense. So there's no DIY aspect to IMDb TV. So, and they are quite heavy on curation. So if we submit maybe 50 films to them, they might take 30, so we actually have to pitch an avail.
Right. And I want,
pick what they want.
And I want everybody to understand though, that you have had a relationship with Amazon going back. You were one of their first films ever streamed on Amazon was one of your films. So you guys have a very unique relationship with Amazon. And if they're treating you like that, how do you think they're going to treat an independent filmmaker uploading to Amazon Video Direct?
You won't have access to, an individual will not have access to IMDb
Correct.
TV. I don't think ever.
Right. No, that's not smart business on their part. There's just enough there's so much content that the studios can dump into Avod. And I've been seeing it constantly that they're just like, well, why not? We'll just toss it in there and see what happens. And there's just so much.
The good news is that the pay rate on that is significantly higher. It's almost equal to what the pay rate used to be a couple of years ago on Amazon. So, because we're getting a share of the advertising revenue. And so it's comparable to like Tubi, if not a little better. So in the end, if your film is good enough for us to get you on there, you're going to make more money there than you would have made on Prime.
So basically, and I know this is good. I mean, I didn't want this to be a depressing episode, but there is definitely some depressing concepts that we're talking about here and issues, which basically is a lot of filmmakers are under the impression that they could just make a movie, any kind of movie with no star power, with no niche audience, with no anything, and go out there, make it. And there were ways of generating revenue like an Amazon where you literally had the power in your hand to upload it yourself, drive traffic there, do some TVOD sales, maybe get part of Amazon Prime. And that's like low hanging fruit. Then if you want to go to the next level, you pay money to an aggregator to put it up on iTunes and Google Play and all these other platforms. And before you could make good money. I've had many filmmakers on my show that have made millions doing that. But it seems like now those days are essentially gone. And a lot of filmmakers are still making content or have made content thinking that that's the way the game is played. Because, and I've said this before as well, our industry pretty much stayed the same. The technology aspect of it and the distribution side of things stayed the same up until pretty much the late 70s, early 80s when VHS was brought into the game. And then even when that happened, we're still talking about maybe a decade to a decade and a half, like let's say like 8 to 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, that VHS was king. Then DVD was just another version of that. And that was king up until the early to mid 2000s. And then streaming, but it seems to now everything keeps speeding up and the change is happening so much faster where before it took forever to change. I mean, I still remember at the beginning of when I launched the Indie Film Hustle, there was still that conversation. Does film look better than digital? Like,
oh yeah,
you remember that was the biggest thing. And I had podcasts about it. I talked about it like, oh, his film, the texture, and this. People are still having that dumb conversation, which the answer is it's up to you. So the business is changing so rapidly. A lot of these filmmakers are not, if they're not listening to podcasts like mine or reading books that are current, they're being left behind and they're getting slaughtered because you know it. You see films all the time. They come in with a $500,000 budget film with no stars attached, with barely a good story, and they're just like that film will never make money. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to say, sorry, you're the bad guy. Like, sorry, this is not going to work.
The other thing is beautiful, important films.
Yeah.
Just there is no market for them right now.
Right.
There's not a market for depressing dramas right now.
Not so much.
Right now, people want to be entertained.
They want to escape. They want to escape.
Yeah. They're feeling bad enough as it's on their own.
And I've said this. And I've said this on the podcast 1,000 times. Please, whoever's making a COVID movie, stop it. Stop it.
Well, we've had two rejected by Amazon.
Right. No, nobody wants a COVID movie. I don't want to watch a COVID movie. Do you want to watch a COVID movie? I see that on the news every day. It's the equivalent of watching a 9/11 film while 9/11's going on, or watching a Vietnam film while the Vietnam War is going on. Like nobody wants to see this.
There has to be some time afterwards. Yeah.
And even then, how many people, there was this era of Vietnam films. There was 4 9/11 films. I'm not sure if there's going to be a moment where we want to go back to COVID. I don't see it anytime soon, at least.
The only thing that might be interesting is when you have kids that didn't experience it and you want to say, here's what it was like.
Because, we're going to be like the grandpas and the grandmas in the nursing homes going, were you alive in 2020? And I'm like, what was that like? I mean, when the aliens landed in November, what was that?
It's so funny that you said that because we were having, all of us, a conversation the other day. We're going, what else could possibly happen?
Aliens?
Somebody said aliens are going to land.
So aliens are going to land. No, aliens are going to land. Atlantis is going to rise. The mole people will finally rise from underground and take over the planet. Blood rain hasn't happened yet. I haven't seen locusts or frogs rain on us yet. I mean, there's a handful, but there's not much left. There's not much. Oh, and the meteor. Don't forget the comet. The meteor or the comet that will eventually hit us.
Right.
I mean, Jesus. It's an insane world that we live in. Now, with COVID, the other thing is, let's talk a little bit about PVOD and the theatrical, because you used to, well, you know what? Before I ask that question, I want to ask you one other question. What do you look for? And I want people listening, filmmakers listening, when you're looking at films as a distributor, what do you want to see in the film besides good quality? Because that's bare minimum. It has to be well produced. But as far as actors, genre, niche, things like that, tell me what you are looking for so people can really understand what a distributor is looking for and what the marketplace is looking for.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
First of all, you have to have a great poster. I hate to be silly, but it's not silly.
Great poster, great trailer helps.
It's absolutely essential. People have to understand that when your movies, if you don't have a star in it, the only way people are going to watch your movie, I mean, if you have great social media engagement, that helps. But when people are sitting on their couch and they look up at their screen and they've got their remote in their hand and they're scanning through, what am I going to watch tonight? What am I going to watch tonight? Your poster has to be clickbait. But it has to grab them. Absolutely has to grab them. So, I mean, I made a joke out of that, but it is super, super, super important. Mm-hmm. So when past that, and it's not the first thing we look at, it's probably kind of the last thing we look at. And if we like the movie and we don't like the poster, we just say, you got to get a new poster.
Right.
Right. So that's how that goes in reality. Because I would say probably only, if we're lucky, half of the people that submit their films to us have a good poster.
Mm-hmm.
And, so the word's getting out there that, you need to have a really good poster. But what we look for is something that grabs your attention right away. We're not terribly genre specific because we have very successful docs. We have very successful thrillers. We have very successful dramas. We have very successful crime films. So the story is very important. The acting is critical. The audio is absolutely essential. We get plenty of films where they look great, but the audio is so bad, and that just takes you out of the movie. It's really, really important. But the most important thing is that the movie grabs you quickly and engages you. And we so many times we see really good movies that have these slow starts, and somehow people get it in their mind, we're going to start slow and build.
Mm-mm.
No, it's better to start with a bang and then explain, right? And then get into the story, because people have so much choice now. If you're not engaging right away, people are out of there. We saw this. This was an amazing thing that we were able to notice when we were doing screenings in Cannes last year. Because Cannes was a virtual market, all of the screenings that we did, we were able to see how long someone stayed in the virtual theater before they left. And we could see on certain movies, after 5 minutes, they're out of there. Or after 10 minutes, they're out of there. But the ones that stayed through the whole movie really liked it. But if you don't get people right in the beginning and engage them in the beginning, they're just as likely to go, I'm bored with this, and just move on to something else because there's so much content.
Well, I mean, that's the same thing that happens to me. Like, my wife and I now are scanning through old shows like that we've heard were good. And I'll give them, 10, 15, like we've literally given a show 15 minutes. And my wife and I go, no. No. And we move on. Or we watch a movie, we'll give it a shot, and we'll give them 5 or 10 minutes. If they don't get us in those 5 or 10 minutes, next. And that is, for better or worse, that is the world that we live in. So you have to ask yourselves, the listeners listening right now, what do you do when you're scanning through Netflix? And this is not just like indie films. This is all big productions, things like that.
Huge.
There's big giant shows, which will remain nameless because I don't want to get hate mail, that I started and I couldn't get into. I was like, I'm sorry. I know everybody loves this show, but I can't, it's not my flavor and it's not grabbing me the same way. Then there's other shows that I watch that are just like, well, I mean, let's just call Cobra Kai what it is. It's absolutely genius. And I watched it on YouTube before anybody, I was one of the originators. So everyone's freaking out now about Cobra Kai, but anyway, we're on a side note. But that's the rule it is. So as a filmmaker, you need to grab them in the first 4 to 5 minutes. It's sad that you don't have the Scorsese time to a Taxi Driver to build it up, or.
And one of the big mistakes that happens is that I've seen indie films that have 10 minutes of credits
up front
in the beginning, up front.
Yeah.
You don't need anything other than the title, the director, and the stars. That's it. Move on. Everybody else's credits can go at the end. And I know a lot of indie filmmakers that go, oh, but my friend did this for free and this one did that for free. If nobody watches your movie, you don't make any money.
No one's going to eat.
And you can't make any more movies.
and no one could eat. No one can eat after that.
Right.
But so obviously
credit's short.
Right. And then stars obviously, and stars still have some sort of cachet, and faces have cachet, even if they don't have a bankable star. Like if Nicolas Cage is not starring in your action movie, you might be able to get a lot of second and third bananas that have good faces to pepper them throughout the piece, that you have a nice poster with faces that people recognize. Does that help?
I'm going to tell you 2 stories to illustrate that. We have a comedy called DeMarcus Cousins Presents Boogie's Comedy Night. This film has by far and away been our biggest seller. It has done high 5 figures for the past 3 months on TVOD on Amazon.
On TVOD?
TVOD. Yes.
But who?
Normal.
How is he driving traffic? He's driving traffic, right? They're driving traffic.
Okay. DeMarcus Cousins, he's big-time basketball player, for one thing.
Okay.
He goes on ESPN and mentions the movie.
Done
game.
Done.
So that's the perfect example of having a name that is willing to mention the film.
But he's not a movie star.
He is not, but he is a huge celebrity, and doesn't need to be a movie star.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a movie star. It can be a big famous athlete, musician, YouTube, someone with an enormous YouTube following or a huge Instagram following. It needs to be somebody famous. And that's the funny thing. It doesn't have to be a movie star anymore.
Someone who has an audience, that is passionate about them.
That's right.
Because OJ starring in your movies, he's very famous. Not going to bring a whole lot of dollars in.
No, but social media currency.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So now here's another story. You know who Vinnie Jones is?
Of course. Yeah.
From Snatch, right?
From Snatch and a ton of action movies. Yeah.
Ton. Okay. Well, I took a film called Ron Hopper's Misfortune, which is a beautifully shot and executed and produced and acted love story fantasy starring Vinnie Jones.
It's not his.
I cannot get anyone to watch that movie.
But that's not an action, though, and that's not what he's known for.
Exactly. If you are going to pick a star, don't cast him in something that's so far out of his genre, for example. So it'd be like if you wanted to cast a big horror film in a super serious drama love story. You need to consider that as well. So that's 2 star stories with very different results.
Now, I know there's another film of yours that has done extremely well, and the kind of currency that it carries is arguably even more powerful sometimes than having a famous person or a movie star in it, which is The Niche. And The Niche, is, which I talk about in my book a lot, is extremely powerful. The film Netflix versus the World.
Yes.
That documentary, which I've saw and I love, and I'm gonna have the director on the show soon. But the director's so smart because he's leveraging a book, if I'm not mistaken, right? It was based on a book, and Netflix, which it's a brand that everybody on the planet knows. And the title of the show, the documentary, is called Netflix versus the World. So I'm going to watch that. I know the story. I read the book and everything, but that's done extremely well, has it not?
Extremely well. And in fact, we actually have, we sold it to Japan, and they're actually doing a theatrical release of the film. And they're also doing DVD and Blu-ray, and they also just sent us an agreement to sign off on them being able to sell T-shirts for it, which I thought would interest you.
Wow.
Right? Okay.
Interesting.
T-shirts for that movie.
So
they're following your plan.
Which is right. They're creating ancillary product lines. So whoever bought the film in Japan, they're like, wait a minute, we're going to milk every little drop out of this. And what are they doing? They're leveraging the Netflix brand. Yes. It's that, and that's what a good documentary, not good documentary, but a lot of successful documentaries, have done that, is by leveraging brands or topics or emotions of a niche audience.
Documentaries about food, for example, always do well. We have one called Fat Fiction, which is about a low carb diet, doing extremely well.
The vegan documentaries always do well. paleo documentaries, those kind of things. Yeah.
And so there are definite things. And there's the old favorites, genres, like horror films, if they're, fairly well executed, do well. Mm-hmm. Genre films are the exception when it comes to production value. People seem to be more forgiving of the production value.
But Amazon might not be.
No.
So that we're screwed either way. We're screwed either way.
Well, if it does well, they're okay with it, but it has to be popular.
Right, exactly. There was a film a while ago called Thanksgiving. It was a Thanksgiving? I think it was Thanksgiving, which is about a killer turkey, a serial killing turkey. And this guy, and we're going back probably 7-8 years. A movie like that today would not get into Amazon. Though that movie, by the way, was sold to Warner's, direct digital, to VOD back in the day. And they made hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the movie cost like $7,000 to $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 or something like that. And they had t-shirts and they had, but a movie like that in today's world might not even get to see the light of day on these platforms, because they're just going to go, no, we're not into this.
Well, we're testing that out right now. We have one called Notzilla, N-O-T-Zilla, that has the coolest hokey monster in it you've ever seen in your life.
Nice. So,
yes,
and
we'll see. It's a fake monster movie parody.
Right. So why not? Let's see what happens. We'll see what happens. Now let's talk a little bit about PVOD, because that's been as of this recording has been in the news a lot. And when I say PVOD, is premium video on demand, which is kind of taking the place of a theatrical release or doing it in conjunction with a theatrical release. But because of COVID, theatrical has pretty much dried up. I know you used to have a theatrical release for a lot of your films. And you used to be able to leverage that to get better sales and to get reviews and Rotten Tomatoes and all that kind of good stuff. But that's pretty much dried up as well at this point. Is that correct?
Well, we have not been able to do a theatrical release since last March. And in fact, the COVID shutdown in the middle of 3 theatrical releases we were having. So they got to do 3 days instead of their 7. Mm-hmm. So, but they did get their reviews. So probably somewhere between a third and a half of our films that we were taking at the time, we would do at least a one week theatrical release in Los Angeles, so we could get an LA Times review and maybe a couple of other good reviews, and that would also get you a Fandango page,
right?
Because Fandango and their trailers and their trailer promotions are
massive,
fantastic,
right.
Absolutely massive. They have a trailer channel for each individual genre on YouTube,
and they all have millions of followers,
millions and millions of views. So that Fandango was important, and you used to only get a Fandango page if you did theatrical, because Fandango was for selling tickets. That's a ticket sale site. That's what that is.
Not so much anymore.
Well, exactly. So. And the same thing, Rotten Tomatoes. If you had a theatrical release, you got, I could get you a Rotten Tomato page up even, a couple of weeks before your theatrical release. So those 2 pages were very, very valuable, and popular with, people wanting to know about a movie.
Right.
And so, once the theater shut down, with a little convincing, we were able to talk both Fandango and Rotten Tomatoes into putting up pages for our releases, saying this was a planned theatrical release, but due to COVID, we
right.
had to release it straight to VOD.
Right.
So now we have a couple of alternatives. We have a movie called Unbelievable that has Snoop Dogg in it. Mm-hmm. And they had and this fits into the category you're talking about, a virtual theatrical.
Right. Virtual.
Advanced ticket sales.
How'd that go?
It went okay. We were disappointed in the number of tickets sold, but I think that you have to be very careful about how you design and price those. There's a company, I think it's called Madison Interactive, that does these for studios. Mm-hmm. And depending on how much money you spend, they actually can be quite expensive, but they will set up like a virtual green room for you so that you can have the stars from the movie actually in this green room and people can interact with them. Right. And, and so there's various options and, it's, if you can promote it well enough to get good enough ticket sales, then I think it can be worth it. Otherwise it could be a loss leader. But,
right.
So while we didn't sell as many tickets as we thought we were going to sell, it did, it was an interesting, experiment to see how that would work.
Well,
we haven't been as successful trying to do drive-ins. The drive-ins that we have spoken with want stars. They want movies, with names that they can really. Yeah,
there's a limited of inventory of screens. Yeah. So they want to be. Didn't you just release Hocus Pocus, the movie from the late '80s, early '90s, the Disney movie with Bette Midler, and it's #1 at the box office, made $2 million. For Halloween. So this is the world Empire Strikes Back Jurassic Park was #1 again a while ago. It's insane. But now the whole PVOD conversation has changed because of Mulan, which was not because originally Trolls 2 did it, but that was a very unique scenario. It was a kid's movie. It was right in the middle of the shutdown. Parents were going crazy. It was a different conversation. Mulan showed up. And from what I understand, the ticket sales numbers is they sold about 9 million tickets
$30
at $30 a pop. So they ended up being whatever that is, $270 million, which is 100% theirs. Yeah. Not no splitting with the theater. Right. And a lot of those people turned into Disney Plus customers because you need a Disney Plus account to even get access to watch it. So if that's the case, and that's with a movie like Mulan, which is not a franchise film. It's big, but it's not like, it's not a Marvel movie. So I'm curious when they put James Bond up on like something like that or the next Marvel movie. But I just heard that Wonder Woman is going to go PVOD.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a very big, because that's a movie that I probably would spend $30 to watch at home.
If you've got, what I would do is I'd invite over a couple of friends.
Sure.
And, and have a watch party, right? We've got an 80-inch television and you have 4 people. Mm-hmm. You know what? 2 people cannot go to the movies for $30.
Well, you can if you sneak in your own popcorn and you sneak in your own drinks. Well, and you go at 9:00 in the morning in LA. Then yes. Other than that, no.
Otherwise you're spending at least $50.
Oh, and that's just 2 people that don't have kids. That don't have kids.
No, you got a couple of kids, you're talking $100. It's
easily.
So $30 is reasonable.
Nothing. It arguably is it's not reasonable in the scope of standard rentals that we were used to at Blockbuster or even on TVOD currently. But it's that or go to the theater. It's going to be a very interesting. The world is changing so rapidly. And let me ask you, do you think theatrical is going to come back in the way it was pre-COVID? Or is it going to be completely different? Because Regal just shut down. Like literally just shut down.
I heard that. And by the way, the new James Bond has been postponed
till 2021. Of course it has. Of course. And I know that's hurt.
They're not going to let that out. You need to see that in the theater.
It's the last, but look, Tenet was supposed to be like the savior and it didn't do anything. Tenet did not bring people, like it made $20 million.
I heard Tenet isn't that good. So
I know, but based on Christopher Nolan's past, movies, you would expect it to do, real gangbuster. But I think it made total theatrically was like $20 million, which is embarrassing for a film like that. But a lot of theaters are closed. So it's a really interesting dilemma.
And Dune, which I was dying, I was actually going to risk going to the theater in December to see, has been postponed to 2022.
Right, exactly, because there's only so many slots that you could fill, because now all these studios, all these big projects that they had in the can there's only so many, there's too much inventory and not enough slots. So now, and I promise you it's going to be pushed.
That, they can only put, even when they do open, at first it's going to be 25% capacity or something. So it's
if you're lucky,
right?
If you're lucky. And how many screens? We're not going to have the same amount of screens as we did before. So I don't think we are ever, let me know what you think.
2 years
at least
before we're back to any kind of normalcy. And that's if we get rid of the virus.
Well, I mean, yeah, and that's a big if. That's a very, very big if. Because it's going to eventually go away, hopefully with a vaccine and things like that. But this could take years. It could take years for it to be kind of eradicated, or at least being dealt with like a flu, dealt with like a flu, that it's not a terminal thing. But the trend with theatrical was going down and had been going down for years. So we all knew.
Indies.
Oh, well, indies, it was completely. But even the studios, you could just start seeing the numbers. Marvel, you pull out Marvel for the last 10 years out of the theatrical experience, and Disney held up the theatrical business by themselves with Star Wars, Pixar, Disney movies, and all the brands that they own. So it's been going down, down, down. This just accelerated everything. I think theatrical will always be around. I think it'll be some sort of theatrical, but it will not be what it was before, because so many people are just like, it's just the same thing as working from home. Before, working from home wasn't a thing. Now everyone's like, well, this is so much better.
Well, except that, it is a social experience. It's a date night thing, and so I think especially for a younger audience, there will always be,
something.
A date night thing. You have to, you have to have some courting. That's like part of our courting process, right?
First of all,
put it delicately.
Linda, you're using the word courting. No one uses the word courting anymore.
Okay, so everybody get laid.
There you go.
You gotta do dinner and a movie.
You gotta go out to dinner and a movie in order to get laid, or at least to make out in a car afterwards. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the myth of TVOD and SVOD in the current world that we live in, because I've been yelling from the top of the mountain that TVOD is dead. Unless you can drive, for independent films, unless you can drive traffic in one way, shape, or form. So the example that you gave, he goes on ESPN, that's driving traffic. That's exactly driving traffic. But if you're an independent filmmaker and you just put up a film with no actors, no star power, not even a niche, let's say it's just a genre horror film, and you throw it up on iTunes hoping for it to be discovered, you're dead in the water. So I'd love to hear your opinion on it.
Okay. I can speak with authority on this topic because I have over 1,000 films on Amazon.
Okay.
Out of the 1,000, 3 are making anything on TVOD. 1 is doing high 5 figures.
Which we discussed.
The next one is making low 5 figures. And the next one is making high 3 figures.
High 3 figures?
Yes, that's the hundreds.
Hundreds of dollars. And then everybody else is making pennies.
Yeah, $5, $3, $2 a month.
A month on TVOD.
It's nothing. Yeah. It's just insignificant. Okay. And that movie Fat Fiction, it did 30 the first month, then just dropped off to 10 and then dropped off to, in transactional. Yeah, in transactional. So what we do is we give everybody 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. We put you out there on 2 weeks. If you don't have any traction, we turn on Prime.
Right.
Then you start making money.
Yeah, and even then, though, now
you start keeping minutes.
You used to start making money. Now
you start getting minutes watched. How much you're going to make depends on how well you engage with your audience.
Now, if you're over that 50% mark, are you in the 6 to 7 cent world at that point?
No, they've scaled that back even. I think you're going to get, you have to get up in order to make 11 cents. You got to be over 95, and you got to be over 98 to get 12 cents.
Jesus Christ.
It's very, very.
So you're fighting for basically crumbs. You're fighting for crumbs.
You're 4 cents at 50%. Maybe by the time you hit 55 or 60, you're up to 5 or 6 cents. But it's a slow rise to the top.
But essentially Amazon doesn't want your business. Essentially, not you personally. I'm talking about just as a general statement.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. They're weeding out, what they consider to be
undesirables.
Yeah, it's sub studio level content. I mean, they want to be regarded as having quality, studio level quality.
Well, to be honest, I've had Amazon Prime forever, and I've always considered Amazon Prime kind of like the dumpster of films. Like I would find occasionally you find gems, but you got to cut through a lot of crap that's up on there. Where Netflix is not like that, Hulu is not like that, HBO is definitely not like that. These other platforms definitely are more curated, and Tubi was like that originally as well. They let everybody in because they needed content, they needed numbers, but now they're starting to pull back too, which we'll get to Avod in a second. But all right, so TVOD, so we can now officially say, everyone listening, TVOD is dead unless you can drive the traffic to it and sustain it.
iTunes, we're seeing nothing.
Nobody's using iTunes anymore. Like nobody. Like unless it's a studio. If it's a studio,
studio films do fine.
Yeah, studio, and people still run studios, films and studio and TV shows,
and especially young families with young children. Young couples with young children, so they'll use Apple TV. They'll buy for their kids, and the kids can watch them over and over and over again.
Yeah, for $10.
Disney films,
Yeah, $10 or something like that, and you're rocking and rolling for a while. And yeah, I mean, I've done that with my kids.
Kids will watch the same thing over and over and over again.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. I never want to see Frozen again, or hear that song. It's still, I still wake up in cold sweats. So everyone listening, TVOD is officially dead. So please don't think that, I've had people on the show before who have made millions on TVOD, but we're talking about 2012 with one of the examples, and another one was like 2015. And they both had massive either stars or audience that they could leverage. So TVOD is dead. So now let's go over to S.
Same with Google Play.
Well, all TVOD. That's included in all the platforms. Yeah. And also
three major ones.
And also that's another thing, another myth that I want to kind of break here today. The three major platforms, if you're going to put up something on the platforms, which are the platforms you need to focus on? Amazon, iTunes, Google?
Those are the three TVOD.
Right. But there's also Fandango, PlayStation, Xbox, and all these other kind of smaller ones. Don't wait.
Indies on Fandango were doing nothing either.
Right. So
we have maybe 50 films on Fandango, and the reason that we even went to Fandango is they were the first one that allowed us to put 4K films up.
Okay.
And we have had 4K films up there for close to 3 years.
Not much.
But indie films don't get any play there at all.
And a lot of filmmakers will go to an aggregator and they'll go, well, I want to be on all the platforms. So they'll spend $5,000 to be put up on Fandango, PlayStation, Xbox for the pure ego boost to say we are everywhere. We're on Vudu, we're on Roku, we're on all of these platforms. And a lot of times, most times, you're not going to see a dime of that. You're not going to get an ROI on that investment. No. Generally speaking. ROI. No.
We still do it just because people
expect it.
They just think it's so important, and it's so hard to convince them.
That's why I hope this episode get seen by everybody and watch and listen to everybody, because there's just realities that are currently happening now that filmmakers are still stuck to the old way of doing things. So before it was, you have to go out to TVOD for 3 to 6 months. Then you would turn on SVOD, and God forbid 3 years later you go to AVOD if there was even a thing. So let's go to SVOD next. So SVOD essentially is Amazon Prime at this point, because there is Netflix and Hulu, but those are like the cream of the crop get accepted to those situations. Is that fair to say?
Well, yes and no. There are others. Like, for example, we're BET. BET is a great subscription channel for urban films, for Black cinema.
Sure.
Okay, and we have quite a few Black cinema films in our catalog. Mm-hmm. We probably have the prime Black cinema catalog, because people that want Black cinema approach us. We don't have to go asking, to get on their platforms. So we've supplied a lot of content to urban flicks. We're in the process of working with BET, and those are subscription channels. They buy the way foreign buyers buy. They pay flat licensing fees. However, what's good about subscription channels is that they will let you still be on TVOD. They don't require a holdback from TVOD. And then usually they will have a set holdback for other subscription and AVOD channels. So, for example, they might say, okay, you can't go on any other AVOD or SVOD for 3 months, for example.
Or 6 months or something like that, yeah. Right.
Well, yeah. So those deals are, and there's quite a few subscription channels out there. But they're specific. They're genre specific in some way, or niche specific. So those are worthwhile, and we look at those first because they do want that holdback, right? Or if you're already out on some AVOD, then they're going to slash the price down really low. They'll still want it, but they're not going to pay. So it's worthwhile for us to look at those, and we can get an answer pretty quick on those. So it's not a big holdup.
And the one thing that a lot of these broadcast channels that are now going into streaming like a BET, AMC Plus just got announced, all of these kind of platforms, one thing that these guys want is E&O insurance. So can you talk a little bit about E&O insurance and how you didn't accept it? You didn't not accept it, but you didn't require it. But now some of these old school broadcasters are asking for it. Absolutely.
And it's interesting because any of the new tech companies, streaming companies like Amazon, Google, Apple, Tubi, none of those have required E&O insurance. And because that was our specialty early on, was dealing with tech companies, because back when we started our company, we couldn't get a studio to talk to us.
Right. So we
were, we went with the innovators, right? And that paid off for us. So those companies, whether it was, I don't know whether they just didn't know about it or what, but they just never required it. And I think the primary reason they don't require it to this day is that if there's an issue with something, they just shut it off. It's like a light switch, right? Boom, you're out. And so
it's not like it's not like you produce like 5,000 or 10,000 DVDs that now you're like, oh man, I've lost all my money.
That's right. You can't. There's nothing to pull. There's nothing to retrieve. And so it's a very simple solution. And the second anyone complains about a film for a copyright issue, it's turned off. Period. Right. And then they'll look into it. So or for example, many times, especially like after the distributor thing happened, when we first started to try and put films back up on Amazon that had been on there through distributor and other channels, they would say, oh no, sorry, so-and-so, that's already been up there with somebody else. And so we would have to go through a legal process of supplying a copy of our contract to, their legal department. And, we finally got it down to a process that was fairly quick, and we were able to do it. But that's the solution in the streaming world. But in the broadcast world, old-fashioned television, broadcast, and cable always have required E&O insurance. So now that all of those companies are branching into streaming,
they're bringing that old.
Eventually, they're just going to drop the broadcast. I think that's just going to go away completely.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything will be streaming within a couple of years. So, but as they now add streaming to their old business, their legal departments are going, oh no, we still need to have E&O, So, and they won't let go of it. And the first instance that we had of that was with BET, and different broadcasters have different limits because they have different experiences with lawsuits. And so one channel might say, okay, we want E&O insurance where every time we get sued, you have to have coverage of at least $1 million for each instance. Others ask for $3 million per instance, and a BET asks for $5 million per instance. So, and I'm not sure why they set the limits where they do, but, it is, if you want your film to be on one of those channels, you have to acquire that E&O. So we've built a relationship with a couple of different brokerage firms, insurance brokers that, are able to provide that insurance. And
it's not that expensive.
Well, a $5 million, for instance, with say a $25,000 retention could cost you up to $10,000.
Right.
For a 3-year policy.
Sure.
And a 1-year policy, the difference between a 1-year policy and a 3-year policy is a couple $100. So you might as well get it for 3 years, and then you're covered if something else comes up. So that's a really important thing, to remember.
But off of but a standard $1 million, per instance, is
it might only cost you $22,000.
Yeah, $2,000 to $3,000 is generally
right. $2,000 to $3,000. So, but that's not always enough. So you want to. So again, our advice always is to our filmmakers: don't get it until we get you a deal. Or if we get you a deal, we'll make sure that the deal will cover the cost of you're getting that E&O, because the filmmaker has to get that E&O.
Right. It's their responsibility.
Can't get it for them.
Right. Exactly. So, you can't have like a policy, a blanket policy with your company that covers all of them. They won't do that.
Nope.
They will not do that.
And I have to tell you, the application, it's about a 10-page application. They ask such really detailed questions.
As they should, as they should, and if anybody wants to know what an E&O in policy is, you can go
Errors
online.
And omissions.
Yeah, you can go online on my website and find out, or I'll leave a link about what it is too. I've talked about it multiple times. But it's something that you do need to have if you want to start playing with the old school guard, if you will. The new school, they don't care.
But let me tell you, I think, as I said before, I think they're all moving into it. Now, Starz has a streaming channel. Showtime has a streaming channel. HBO, BET, Turner.
AMC?
Yeah, AMC. I think eventually they'll all. And, a really easy way to see is if you have a Roku box, go look in their streaming channel store and you will see. Right now there are 953 movie channels. Mm-hmm. 953.
And growing on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And growing on a daily basis. All right. So now let's talk about what I know you've been dying to talk about. Avod. And, which is, I would guess ad-based video on demand or advertising video on demand. Avod was basically the redheaded stepchild. Sorry for all you redheads out there. But the stepchild of video on demand. And it was like the place where films go to die was with the original concept of Avod. Is like, oh man, if you movie's not making any money or it's just pretty much done, you put it up on Avod or YouTube. Like YouTube is Avod essentially, but it's just not an exclusive Avod. It's literally open to the whole world as well. So that has changed dramatically. So can you please tell us your experience with Avod and how it is currently affecting your bottom line and your filmmaker's bottom line?
Avod now is providing the best ROI for our filmmakers. And I think that is going to just keep expanding. And there's very good underlying reasons for that if you think about it. Old-fashioned television has always been paid for by advertisers. And everybody watched television and everybody sat through the ads or got up and went to the restroom or, or made some popcorn or whatever. It was just a part of life. You watch television, you watch the ads. Well, when the streaming came around and on demand, where you were paying for it basically, there was nothing in it for the advertisers, right? They had no interest in it. But when the first Avod channels started to come about, and the very first one that got hugely popular was Tubi TV. Mm-hmm. And Tubi TV, we have been on for more than 10 years. And for the first 8, no one even knew what it was. First of all, it wasn't called Tubi. It was called AdRise. And it was interesting how that happened because we, one of our very first channels that we were on or stations was called Cassie. And in the beginning on the internet, it wasn't streaming. It was downloadable DVDs.
Right.
So in other words, right, that's how we started this whole journey because the internet wasn't fast enough to watch over the internet.
Right.
But you could buy, instead of going to the video store, you could download the movie and watch it. Easier than going to the video store, right?
Arguably, the technology was a little bit wonky, let's say.
Right. So there were two. Amazon was the first with Unbox.
Right.
And our movie, Shifted, was the first indie film on Unbox. And then there was another one called Cassie. And it was started by this guy by the name of Tom Hicks. Well, Amazon survived, but Cassie did not because they weren't charging enough. They were giving 70% to the filmmakers, and it was so early that it wasn't enough for them to survive. So they wound up, closing that company. Well, then Tom Hicks got involved in a whole new business, and that was the start of AdRise, which is to make advertising-based streaming. And that AdRise became Tubi. And it was only renamed to Tubi, 3 years ago, something like that. And when we first started doing it, people were just as adamant about not doing Avod as they were putting your whole movie up on YouTube.
Right.
It was like, oh, you're giving away my movie for free. And I still have people that say, oh, my movie's for free on this channel. They just don't get the concept that, yes, it looks like it's free, but people are watching ads and you are getting half the advertising revenue, right? Mm-hmm. They just don't understand that coming from a different place. Now, what's happened is that the advertisers now see that everybody's going to streaming. So their way of getting in on the streaming business, right, is to go with these Avod channels because it's just they've created a new television. Avod is the new television. And it's a better television than the old television, only in that you can watch what you want when you want to watch it. You no longer have to be home on Tuesday night at 9:00 to see such and such show.
Or record it on your VCR.
Or use TiVo, is it?
Well, it was called TiVo. I'm talking about old school automatic record. Yeah.
Record. Right. So now you can just, it's only natural that the advertisers have glommed onto streaming. And so that's why you see that especially the companies, the big media companies like Universal, right, mm-hmm. that are losing their advertisers from their regular linear TV, right? They have moved, they watch their advertisers leaving them and going to streaming. So that's why part of why Universal has Peacock, which is streaming Avod, right? So it's a way to transition from the old school broadcasting and cable into modern streaming and modern television. So that's why I see Avod as, the new frontier for filmmakers to earn revenue.
Now, but with Tubi specifically, because there's Tubi and Pluto and there's IMDb TV and Peacock and a couple other ones as well. But when Tubi lots of other ones, excuse me. And growing, as I'm sure there's 5 of them that just opened up while we've been talking. The issue I saw was that originally Tubi was wide open and there weren't a lot of movies up there. So any movies that did get up on the platforms, they would get a bigger chunk of the advertising revenue because there was less competition. Now there's a lot more competition on Tubi. Are you seeing revenue drop per movie?
Nope.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
No. The advertising, it's measured in eCPMs, mm-hmm. Per 1,000 views of an ad, right? The number of ad impressions, we're getting paid the same amount for the ad impressions that we've always gotten paid.
Mm-hmm. But per title, is it per
ad?
No, not per ad, but per title. I'm saying is like the pie smaller per film as it is, because before, let's say you had 10 films up on Tubi, each film would probably get a lot more ad place in a lot more place because there's less competition. But now that there's so much more content on Tubi, the ad revenue still might be the same, but the per film might be less. Or am I mistaken?
Like any platform, maybe your top 10, 15% of your movies are making 90% of the revenue.
Right. It's the 80-20. Okay. It's the 80-20 principle.
Yeah. It's that 80-20 situation, and that's true on just about every platform that we're on. Mm-hmm. But the actual amount of money we're getting paid, per ad is pretty consistent.
Is that do you mind asking, or is that number kind of classified as far as a per ad?
Between 9 and 11
cents. Dollars.
Yep.
Per 1,000 views.
Yeah.
Or per 1,000 views. For impressions. So that's actually pretty good, and that's actually pretty good. And I've had filmmakers who've decided to put their movies up on YouTube, and if they have a monetizable channel and they have a lot of views.
Oh yeah.
Some of those CPMs I've seen, depending on the genre and things, we're talking about $20, $30 CPMs on their 1,000 views of what they're doing.
You can very definitely make money on YouTube movies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fairly insane. Okay. But again, this is what we're trying to do with this episode is to change people's mentality about what the realities of the world that we live in currently as of this recording is. In a year or two, Avod might be old. I don't know. Maybe there'll be some new thing that you and I don't even know is coming down the line.
But for the immediate future, Avod is where the business is trending towards and is in. Something that's interesting to note mm-hmm. is that different Avod channels have different demographics. Mm-hmm. So my top 20 list on Tubi is extremely different than my top 10, 20 list on Pluto or my top 20 list on IMDb TV. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very different demographic. You'd think it would be all the same, but it's not.
Yeah, one movie that does well on one platform could tank on another.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think part of why that is that Tubi was first, and it was available to people that couldn't afford cable and couldn't afford a lot of subscription channels. So they were forced to watch with ads.
Right. But
that audience grew.
And is growing.
So yes. And so Tubi tends to be that, that audience, although it's changing and other people are starting to change, but that's not true of IMDb TV, because people at IMDb TV, one, they're getting on there through Amazon Prime. So they're people that had money to spend on Prime.
Right.
So it's a different demographic.
And now are you seeing that the numbers on these Avod platforms are starting to go up because we are in an economic downfall right now?
Absolutely.
And it's
COVID, people are at home too.
Right. And they've lost their jobs and they don't have the money and they still want to be entertained. So they'll buy a Roku connection or a box for what does Roku cost? Like $30?
Roku, their premium box, I think, is like $60 or $70. And, or you can get their streaming stick, which is a light version of it for, I don't know, $30.
Right. Exactly.
Or Amazon Fire.
Fire Stick. Yeah. Because that's like $20 or $30 right.
If you buy a new TV, it's all built in.
Right. Exactly. So for no money, you essentially could just, if you've bought a new TV, if you're lucky enough to have a new TV, but if you don't, you could buy a $20 to $50 box, essentially, have access to all the content you want for free. Just have to deal with ads. And for somebody in a family that is hurting or lost their jobs or the economy's really hit them hard, this is an option. And it's becoming more and more so, not only here, but around the world. Now, that's another thing. How are your sales internationally, and how are you generating revenue internationally? Because before, I know Prime was a very big deal for you internationally, but how are you doing it now?
Well, every month, more and more people are streaming globally. And every month, channels are increasing, their territorial reach. Like when Tubi for the first couple of years was only US. And then they added Canada, and then they added UK, and now they're adding Latin America. So, and they plan on expanding. Yeah. So I think we're going to see these streaming channels go global. I really do.
Right. And so, but for right now, what are the trends that you're seeing currently in regards to revenue streams coming in for independent films internationally? Like, where are you making money internationally?
UK is probably, English speaking territory still is the primary.
But is it, no, I understand, but is it like SVOD? Is it TVOD? Is it AVOD? What is the form?
Oh, it's Prime, because that's where we're in the most territories.
Got it. So Prime is still internationally. Prime is still generating revenue for you and your filmmakers.
Yes, and Prime and Prime outside the U.S. and the UK is not as dependent on that CER.
Oh, because they want market share in those areas. So
different pay rates. That's right, because they're growing those markets, so they have higher pay rates.
Right, because they want, if they have content in those markets, and that's another thing. I think we talked about this privately. If you can have a dubbed version of your film or a subtitled version of film, how does that work? Okay. And does that generate revenue for you?
All right. So we'll talk about Amazon first. There are 68 territories that are English speaking. And so, automatically we can put you in all those 68, although we have a tendency, if we think something has the potential to sell at a market, at AFM or Cannes, we'll hold off turning those on until we go to the market. And then that way, if we say do an all rights deal for the UK or for Japan or whatever, then we don't turn those on Prime. And then after the market, we know what we can sell and what we can't sell, then we can go back and turn it on everywhere where we didn't sell it. Right? So that works really good. So then, if you get French subtitles, and Rev does subtitles in all languages.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I'll put a link to the show notes. Rev is great.
Yeah, very reasonable pricing. French gives you 30 more territories. I had no idea that French was the actual national language in 30 countries still.
I mean, they were an empire. I mean,
I didn't realize that. I didn't know. I mean, I knew they were big, but I didn't realize they were that big.
Sure.
Right. So they were huge. So that's 30 more territories. And then for Spanish, you can get 22 more. So that brings you over 100 just for those three.
Mm-hmm.
In general, we don't recommend you doing single language countries like Italy.
Or Germany.
Because it's only Italy. Well, Germany is requiring dubbing.
And that's expensive.
That's expensive. Probably like $5,000 to $8,000.
Sure. Yeah, because you need actors. You need it's a whole thing.
And then same with Japan. Japan, for streaming, it's got to be dubbed. So for those countries, we try to do foreign sales to buyers.
Sure.
All rights sales at the market. And then they'll take care of the dubbing.
Right.
And sometimes they'll actually give you a dubbed version of it. And same with China. So for those three, we don't do with Amazon. We do with foreign buyers.
Is China even a market anymore? I mean, I know the embargoes really hurt the market.
They're not happy with the U.S. right now.
Yeah, that's obvious.
We've been very mean to them lately.
Yes.
With the China flu.
Yes, that's exactly. Among other things, yes, the trade embargo and the tariffs and all that stuff. Yeah.
I think that we'll see what happens with the election.
Sure.
Depending on who's president, that could change dramatically.
Because
buyers waiting.
Right. So pre this administration, I sold This Is Meg to China.
We sold 40 films to China.
Right. So I mean, there was a market
for good money. Oh, sure.
Oh, and it was good money. Absolutely was good money. Yes. But so it's all dependent on that. But right now they're still kind of like, are you selling anything to China anymore or not as much?
Yeah. You know what? We've got a couple buyers recently, and I think what they're doing is they're like trying to hedge the market, thinking, okay, we're going to buy now because it's going to open back up. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a little interest. Yeah.
All right.
So let's see.
It's an ever moving playing field. The rules are changing all the time. The playing field is changing all the time. The players are changing all the time. And I want filmmakers listening to understand that you have to stay on top of this. Just because you started your movie 12 months ago, the distribution landscape is not what it was when you started the process of making your film. You have to stay on top of it almost all the time. And the players are changing. The scams are changing. I mean, I don't know about you. I heard the other day, I had a consulting client showing me a deal. This company wanted their rights in perpetuity. Literally as blatant as it was. Like,
so they're out now buying the film,
but no money up front.
Oh,
no money up front. It was a percentage deal.
Oh, that is amazing.
It was like a 35 or 40% deal for them, and then the filmmaker would get the rest. And it was a perpetuity. It was in perpetuity. And I'm like, oh, and no expense cap. No expense cap. I'm like, oh, so you're basically just giving them your movie. Oh, okay. It's a gift. It's a gift. You're very generous. You're very, very generous. But this is the kind of stuff that's happening all the time. So in the future, where do you see, I mean, I guess we kind of answered that question, but in the future, do you see Avod as a place for filmmakers that's going to be the main?
I think for the foreseeable
independent filmmakers.
Future,
right.
That Avod and some SVOD.
And TVOD if you have an audience and you could drive traffic.
If you can drive the business or you have serious names, then you can get away with TVOD.
Now,
but it's.
Let me ask you one question. This is going to be a hard question, so feel free not to answer it if you don't want to. The question is, what kind of budgets? Like if you have a $350,000 movie, if you have a $500,000 movie, can you expect to generate an ROI on that investment through Avod specifically, or just Avod, or just like basically the revenue streams that you're talking about without selling international, without what's the boiling point where you're seeing like, you know what, if your movie is over 150, 200, and again, this is case by case basis. I know that every movie's different, but generally speaking, if it's $100,000 movie, obviously if you have a $10,000 movie that has Nicolas Cage in it, you have a really good chance of making your money back. So the lower the budget's always better, but there's a balance. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think that if you have a decent film that you spent $150,000 on, you can expect to recoup in a couple of years.
Right. But once we start getting into that $500,000, 600,000, you really have to have all cylinders firing at all times, hitting perfectly every single time.
Yes. Unless there is something going on in the market that makes your content valuable.
An anomaly.
For example.
An anomaly, basically.
Well, our black cinema, we have lots of films that make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. Okay. It's an underserved market right now. Right. So how long that will last, I don't know.
Right. Tyler Perry built an entire empire off of that niche.
Exactly. The answer is it depends. So you don't necessarily, and none of those have stars. Right. They don't have any stars in them. A couple of them might have some Instagram
celebrities.
Rapper. Yeah. But in general, it's not necessary for them to be successful. It has to be still has to be a good story and have good production value.
Mm-hmm. But generally that's not enough anymore.
Right.
It's not.
But that is an underserved market and we see quite a bit of success for that. So.
All right. So what advice would you give a filmmaker that is going to sell their film in today's marketplace?
I would not do anything more than an ultra low budget, right? If you're making a SAG film.
100,000 and below, 150,000 and below?
No, it's 250 is SAG, ultra low budget. Right?
Okay.
So I wouldn't go over that. If you don't have any names, I wouldn't go over $100,000. We have a new movie coming out. It's supposed to have a theatrical release at Arena on the 30th called Blood from Stone. And it's a contemporary vampire film, and meant to be, a Halloween release. But as of today, the theater's still not open. So
it doesn't look like it's going to be open on the 30th either.
so we don't know. There's a very slight chance that in the next 2 weeks, because California is one of the few states that actually has a very low infection rate right now.
Currently, as we speak right now.
Next week. So I don't know. So anyway, if it doesn't, then we'll just forget about the theatrical and go straight to VOD. But that film, we were able to keep in low six figure, and that's you have to do that. Very low six figure. And I think that we'll be fine. Without stars. Doesn't have stars.
But it's genre. It's sub niche of a genre. So it's horror and it's vampire horror. So like zombie horror or ghost horror or.
Right. I would stay away from relationship genres. I would stay away from cabin in the woods. There's certain ones that are just so tired and overdone. Right. That, and I would not reach too far into serious subject matter right now. Like,
don't go too deep.
We've gotten probably, I would say, in the past 6 months, maybe 20 really beautifully done movies about mental illness. But
nobody wants to see that
right now. I just think it's a very, very hard time.
But with documentaries,
serious,
but documentaries, with that same topic might do better than a narrative, or you're saying none at all, even with documentaries?
I wouldn't even do it with a documentary right now. And, again, we have several of those, and it's just, I think people are more receptive to that when we're having better times. Then they can be a little more contemplative and look at some serious subject. But right now, people are suffering enough in their own life, and it's they need something that's uplifting.
And that is why, if you guys are watching, you guys know that I always have a Yoda in my office, my trusty co-pilot in life. In the 70s, which I was born in the 70s. I'm not that old. But I do, from history books and films, I've seen that in the late 70s and mid to late 70s, it was a really dark time in our country. Economically, we were rough. The Nixon thing happened. The war was going on. And there was these dark, depressing Taxi Driver and The Godfather, like these really just heavy films. Then something called Star Wars showed up. And everybody was like, oh my God, yes, I want to escape into a galaxy far, far away. And that's where we're actually in right now. We're in a very dark time in not only our history, but the world's history. And it ain't over yet, folks. We don't know where this train's going. It is a dumpster fire that's wrapped in a train that is just careening down a dark tunnel, and we have no idea where the exit is or where the exit is. So True. It could be another year. It could be another 5 years. And I don't want to say that, but
don't say it.
I know I don't want to, but I think that movies moving forward, you really got to look at the marketplace. And I think you're absolutely right. You have to create content that is going to be uplifting. That's going to be escapism. That's why the Marvel films do so well. That's why superhero films have been doing so well. It's complete escapism. It's complete escapism. So we're living in a very interesting time, Linda.
I agree. But I'm very glad that I'm, in this particular part of our industry right now, because it is the part of the industry that is suffering the least. And we are able to give people something that can allow them to escape. And, there's very little entertainment right now. There's no sports. There's no concerts. There's no theme parks. So at least we can be putting out, we feel good that we're putting out movies that can entertain people and help pass the time.
Now, one last question I want to ask you. Do you, because you're doing very well, but you've actually been prepping for this moment for the last decade and plus. So you were in the online, hey, this is the future thing as long as I've known you and many years before that. So you were primed to take advantage of this moment in time and what's coming down the line. So you're actually prepared. A lot of other distribution companies, especially the older ones and especially the larger ones, were not prepared and aren't ingrained and don't understand this side of the business nearly as much as a company like you. And also you're a small, limber company. You can pivot very quickly. You're like a speedboat where a lot of these guys are giant carriers that take days and weeks and years to kind of even make a slight adjustment. So you are perfect kind of company to be in this moment. What do you think is going to happen to the distribution side of the business? Do you think that you're going to start seeing companies crash and burn around you like in 2008? Because I still think we haven't even begun to feel the economic hit yet. So when that happens,
I absolutely think that we are going to lose probably half the distributors out there. And the reason I say that is that anyone that's been in business, like more than 10 years, and there are many of these companies that have been around for 30 years, right? Those ones that started 30 years ago, they have big offices in Beverly Hills.
Yep, overhead.
Right? They have huge
staff.
They have warehouses filled with DVDs and screening rooms and all of this huge overhead. I don't know how they can survive. I just don't know how they can survive. And because they're so late getting into the streaming business, there are very few of these companies that do what we do in-house.
Right.
Okay. We take in films, we QC them, encode them, and deliver them to the cloud now. We have a cloud-based inventory system where we manage our content in the cloud. So these other companies, they have deals, output deals with labs and post-production.
And they're still sending out hard drives.
And they're sending the films to them to get encoded and delivered. So that's a huge upfront expense that they have. Now, granted, they're recouping that from the revenue that comes in on the films.
Oh, from the filmmakers aren't making that money.
The filmmakers aren't making that money, but also with this 80-20 thing, most of their films are losing money, so they're spending a lot of money that they're never going to even recoup themselves.
Right. And we still haven't. I feel we still have not hit the bottom. Our economy still has not hit the bottom.
No, we haven't. So now that we have have all of our content residing in the cloud, if a new big channel comes to us and says we want 300 films, we could literally send them an email with a list. Like, say somebody comes and says, okay, I want all your horror films.
Mm-hmm.
Say 300 of them. All right. I can with an email deliver that because I'm just sending them a link to a bunch of buckets on AWS that they're going to grab those films from. And if they're a good high-tech company like we are, they have AWS, and it just goes bucket to bucket in the cloud.
It never even...
Never use the internet.
Never download. It's all within the system over there.
Yeah. It's all within the cloud. It's cloud to cloud. Instead of B2B, it's cloud to cloud.
Right, exactly. And a lot of these companies, and like last year when we went...
I don't know anything about it.
Last year when I went to AFM, you and I were both on a panel. We're going to be on panels this year again at the virtual AFM. I was walking around AFM. I think it was about 40 or 50% less people. I think it was down 60% as far as vendors are concerned. And I literally was walking over carcasses of dinosaurs. Like you could see the old school distributors with the cigar. They look like they're 105 years old, talking like it's 1985. I would see it, and then you would see it. So those guys, they can't survive in this environment. They barely were surviving pre-COVID. So when you just said something very interesting, you said 50% of distributors, and that, by the way, that also can include some very big distributors, big companies, studios that could easily go down as well. Who do you think is going to go down with them? The films and the filmmakers that they have in their catalogs, the back money that has to come in, because when it goes down, the ship goes down, they're going to take everybody with them. Just like when Distributor went down. We're still waiting for money. We're still waiting for money on that. So it's going to be a very, very interesting time. And I think it's going to be a very sad time for a lot of filmmakers, as well as the distribution company, but distribution companies going down. But do you have any hope that after Rome burns, because I've been yelling that Rome is burning for a long time, after Rome burns, the new system that will come up around it will be something that will hopefully be better and have more access and can benefit filmmakers more than the current, because the current system that's been around since Chaplin's day was never designed to help filmmakers, was never designed to help make money for filmmakers. Do you think this new system is there a chance for that?
I don't know. I think it's almost part of being a new filmmaker. It's like
you have to be abused. You have to be taken advantage of. Got it.
It's like your apprenticeship,
Wow.
You struggle in the beginning.
Right.
And it's like, who is it? Malcolm Gladwell says you need 10,000 hours to become an expert at something.
But to be fair, Linda, even professional filmmakers are having problems making money with their films. Filmmakers have been around for 10, 15 years making money with their films. So it's not just the newbie that's going to get abused.
No, that's true. But the people that are going to survive are the ones that educate themselves and stay educated on where the market is and stay up with new technology, because that's what's happening. I would not be shocked to see a couple of the major studios go down.
Oh no,
I don't care whether it's Paramount.
So
I mean, we've already seen Fox go away.
So four, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again: the 4 companies that are vulnerable are Paramount, Lionsgate, Sony, MGM.
Yeah.
They all have massive libraries that someone like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, or Google can come in and buy. Netflix is also a studio that is vulnerable. It is vulnerable, I think, and could be purchased by Apple. Could come in and buy Netflix.
Yeah.
The only studios I think that will survive this without being touched is Disney, Warner's, and Universal, because they have the most diversified business plans.
Right.
They have the most diverse. So those are the ones I feel go. I mean, why hasn't MGM been purchased? Like, just for their library. Yeah. Sony, I mean, if you read that book, The Big Picture, I mean, Sony's, the only thing keeping Sony alive is their television department. Yeah. And the occasional James Bond that comes out every 5 freaking years.
Yeah. And it's, the old studios, they let the tech companies just like
they came in and took over. Netflix changed the game. Netflix. I was saying this the other day. It took Disney 10 years to release Disney Plus. 10 years. Netflix had a head start because Netflix streaming started in 2010. It sucked, but they started in 2010. It took 10 years. And then now everybody because of Disney Plus, and everyone started to jump on the bandwagon in 2019 and 2020, but it took them 10 years to get going. So all these other companies had such high.
Universal, Peacock's the only, I don't see a Warner Brothers, channel.
No, it's HBO Max. That's Warner Brothers channel. Yeah. It's HBO Max. And they're leveraging a very, very good brand. HBO is an amazing brand.
It is, but Warner Brothers was a great brand.
It was, but you know what? And now 20th Century Fox is gone. Like, that brand is gone. Disney erased it. 20th Century Fox. So now it's 20. I saw the logo for the latest Ryan Reynolds movie called The Good Guy, and it says 20th Century Studios. And the logo, the old school 20th Century Fox logo, but at the beginning, because it was kind of like left over in their purchase. Right. It's called 20th Century Studios now, until it's gone completely. Until all these films come in and go out. It is, who in their right mind would have thought that Disney could buy Fox and everything that Fox, I mean, that's an insane thing. And so it's not beyond someone like Apple who has, I don't know, 400 billion cash.
Ridiculous.
Cash. They could buy Disney.
They need to do something, because iTunes and Apple TV are just not doing it.
No, they're not, but they're waiting. They're waiting in the wings, and Amazon was going to buy AMC. Oh, someone's going to buy Regal. Someone will buy Regal, and someone will buy AMC's. And a lot of people are like, well, why would they buy a movie theater chain? There's no money in that. I'm like, no, there's a difference. Have you been to the El Capitan?
Of course.
That is the model. That is the model that makes sense.
Premium theaters.
Not only premium theaters, but what do they have? They're film entrepreneurs. They've got an entire Disney store next door. Yeah. And it's an event going in there, and they have answers. So all of a sudden, and if they own the theater, guess what? They own 100% of the revenue coming in through the door. So they don't have to share it. That is a business model. And there's a lot, our landscape's going to change dramatically in the next 2 to 3 years.
We shall see. It's going to be exciting.
It is exciting. It is terrifying all at the same time, Linda.
And we feel very confident that we're going to be around to enjoy it. So
you've positioned yourself. Excited. You've positioned your company in a way that is that you'll be able to survive. And even if something comes, there's going to be some things that you guys are not going to be prepared for. You're small enough of a company that you could just box and weave. You're not this big, giant, bloated beast that's going to take forever, and you have bureaucracies to go through and stuff like that. No, you just like, you know what, we're moving this way tomorrow, and you move.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between a smaller company and these large conglomerates. But listen, we can continue to talk for a while, but I appreciate you taking out the time because I know you are extremely busy right now.
I am.
With a ton of stuff. AFM is coming up as of this recording, and MIPCOM has started as well, and all of that kind of stuff. So I truly appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us. And give us the latest updates on the realities of the film distribution business as it is today. So again, thank you so much. I will put links to everything to how to get in touch with Linda on the show notes. So Linda, thank you again, and give my best to Michael. You guys do an amazing job over at Indie Rights. So thanks.
And I want to thank you very much for the opportunity. It's always great to have a chance to, through you, talk to our filmmakers, our future filmmakers, and be able to share some information that helps them to navigate these murky waters.
Shark infested, as I like to call it. Shark infested. Thank you again, Linda. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.
I want to thank Linda for coming on the show and dropping those knowledge bombs on the tribe. Thank you very, very much. If you want to get links to anything we talked about in this episode, including how to reach out to Linda and Indie Rights, head over to the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/436. Now, I always like to put a disclaimer anytime I have a distribution company or someone representing a distribution company or aggregator on the show. Please do all your homework and due diligence with anybody you're thinking about doing business with in the distribution space. I've had a really great experience with my films with Linda, but you should absolutely reach out to other filmmakers who've worked with Indie Rights and see if they are a good match for your film. And if you haven't already, please head over to filmmakingpodcast.com and leave a good review for the show. It really helps us out a lot. Thank you so much for listening, guys. As always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive. Stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.